She had always loved music, even before she could fully understand it. From the time she was a small child, the sounds of her surroundings seemed to speak to her. The wind rustling through the trees, the patter of rain against the windows, the creak of the old wooden floor in her home. All of it felt like a melody waiting to be discovered. She didn't have a piano at first, not even a proper instrument, but she had an old keyboard that had been tucked away in the corner of the living room for years. The keys were a little sticky and some notes were off, but she didn't mind. To her, it was perfect. Every day after school, she would rush to that keyboard, drop her backpack on the floor, and start pressing keys. At first, she could only manage simple tunes, things she had heard her parents hum or songs that came on the radio. She struggled to hit the right keys, and more often than not, her fingers fumbled, creating sounds that didn't make sense. But she loved it anyway. Every mistake felt like a lesson, and every little success like a small victory. She started to notice patterns in the music, and slowly, over weeks, she could play simple songs without looking at the keys. Her family noticed her interest, though they didn't understand it fully. Her parents worked long hours trying to make ends meet, and they didn't have much time for hobbies. They were proud of her curiosity but often reminded her to focus on her studies. Her siblings were supportive but also teased her when she practiced the same song over and over. Still, she kept at it. Late at night, when the house was quiet and everyone was asleep, she would sit at her keyboard and play until her fingers ached and her eyes were heavy with sleep. In those moments, she felt free, as if the music was a place where she could escape the stress and noise of the world. School life didn't make it easier. She wasn't particularly popular and often felt like an outsider. The other kids were more interested in sports or social media, but she had her music. Whenever she felt lonely, she would hum a tune in the corridor or tap rhythms on her desk. It was her secret companion, always there when she needed comfort or courage. Her teachers noticed her dedication to something, though they didn't know exactly what it was. They would sometimes give her little nods of encouragement, telling her to keep exploring her talents. One afternoon, her music teacher announced a small talent show at school. She hesitated to join at first. The thought of performing in front of everyone made her stomach twist with nerves. What if she made a mistake? What if the music sounded wrong? But something inside her told her she had to try. It wasn't about winning. It was about sharing the music she loved, the part of herself that often went unnoticed. She signed up, choosing a simple tune she had been practicing for weeks. It was a melody she had come up with herself, inspired by the songs she loved but with her own twist. It wasn't complicated, but it felt personal, like a little piece of her heart was folded into every note. The days leading up to the performance were filled with practice and anxiety. She would sit in her room, playing the tune over and over, listening carefully to each note, adjusting here, correcting there. Her fingers learned the movements by heart, but her mind still worried. What if people laughed? What if they didn't like it? Her parents noticed her tension and offered gentle support. They didn't fully understand her music, but they could see how important it was to her. Their quiet encouragement helped her hold onto her confidence even when doubts crept in. Finally, the day of the talent show arrived. The auditorium was buzzing with excitement, filled with students, parents, and teachers. She stood backstage, clutching her sheet music and feeling her heart pound in her chest. She could hear the other performers, kids dancing, singing, even playing instruments she had never seen before. She tried to remind herself that she wasn't competing with anyone. This was her moment, and it didn't have to be perfect. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, and for a moment, she froze, feeling the weight of all the eyes on her. But then she remembered the countless nights she had spent at the keyboard, the music that had been her companion through quiet evenings and difficult days. She placed her fingers on the keys, and the first notes came out softly, a little shaky but full of feeling. As she continued, she became more confident, letting the melody flow naturally. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the music as if it was speaking for her. The audience was quiet, listening. She could hear the soft murmur of someone turning in their seat, the faint breathing of others, but mostly there was silence. In that silence, she found strength. Each note she played carried a little of her story. The long hours of practice, the lonely afternoons, the determination to follow her passion despite everything. By the time she reached the end of the tune, she could feel a small smile forming on her face. She had done it. She had shared her music her way, and that was enough. When she opened her eyes, she saw faces looking at her with surprise and admiration. A few people clapped immediately, then more joined in. Her heart swelled with a mixture of relief and joy. It wasn't a huge performance, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that mattered more than anything. Backstage, her friends and family hugged her, telling her how beautiful it was, how proud they were. In that moment, she realized that music wasn't about being the best or impressing everyone. It was about expressing something true, something only she could bring to life. After the show, she felt a spark of possibility. Maybe one day she could do more with her music. Maybe she could learn more, play more complex tunes, and reach more people. But for now, she was content with this small victory. She had started with a basic tune, something simple and personal, and she had shared it with the world. The feeling of pride, mixed with excitement for the future, stayed with her long after the applause faded. It was the beginning of something bigger, a journey that would continue, note by note, day by day, fueled by her passion and her unwavering love for music. After the small success of her first performance, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. Excitement because she had tasted the joy of sharing her music with others. Fear because she realized how much more there was to learn. Every time she sat at her keyboard, she felt a new challenge looming over her. She wanted to play more complicated pieces, to feel the music in a deeper way, and to impress not just her family and friends, but also herself. But the path forward was not easy. Her school life continued as usual, with its share of distractions and pressures. Teachers piled on homework, exams loomed, and her friends had their own interests that didn't always include music. Sometimes she felt torn between keeping up with her schoolwork and pursuing her passion. It was hard to find time for long practice sessions. There were days when she would come home exhausted, sit at the keyboard for a few minutes, and then fall asleep, wishing she had more hours in the day. Yet she never gave up. She knew that if she wanted to grow, she had to be persistent. Her family was supportive, but they couldn't provide much guidance in music. They encouraged her, praised her efforts, and sometimes even clapped when she played at home. But they didn't know how to teach her, how to guide her toward improvement, or how to help her navigate the complexities of music theory. She tried online tutorials and books, but the learning curve was steep. She often spent hours on a single section of a piece, replaying it again and again until it sounded right. She became patient with herself, learning that mastery was not a quick path. There were moments when self-doubt crept in. She would compare herself to others, students who had been trained for years or who played instruments with a skill she had not yet developed. She wondered if she would ever be good enough, if her music would ever sound polished and professional. Some nights she would cry quietly, frustrated at her slow progress, at the mistakes she couldn't seem to fix. But even in those moments, she never abandoned the keyboard. Music had become more than a hobby. It was a companion, a friend that stayed with her even when the world felt cold or challenging. One day, her school announced another talent show, bigger than the last, with students from other classes and even some from nearby schools. The idea of performing in front of a larger audience was terrifying. She felt the familiar swirl of nerves in her stomach. But then she remembered the thrill of her previous performance, the joy of connecting with people through her music. This time, she wanted to do more than just play a simple tune. She wanted to challenge herself, to show growth, and to create a piece that could really touch people. She spent weeks preparing. She experimented with different songs, mixing simple melodies with new techniques she had been learning. She would stay up late at night, practicing until her fingers ached. Some pieces she tried didn't work, and she would throw them aside, frustrated but determined. Other times, she stumbled onto something magical, a melody that seemed to flow naturally, that made her heart race with excitement. She recorded herself, listened critically, and refined every note until it felt just right. Her friends noticed her dedication. Some of them admired her commitment, but others didn't understand it. They would invite her to hang out, to play games or go to parties, and she often declined, choosing practice instead. Occasionally, someone would tease her gently, asking if she was ever going to stop playing that piano. At first, she felt hurt, but she soon realized that their words didn't matter. Her focus was on her music, on the story she wanted to tell through her fingers, and on the progress she could see in herself. The closer the talent show came, the more intense her practice became. She wanted her performance to be flawless, not because she was trying to impress others, but because she wanted to prove to herself that she could do it. She memorized every note, worked on expression, and imagined the audience reacting to the music. Sometimes she would play standing up, moving her hands dramatically, just to feel the energy of a real performance. She learned to control her breathing, to stay calm when mistakes happened, and to let the music guide her emotions. Her parents were quietly supportive throughout this time. They noticed the spark in her eyes, the determination that didn't let her rest. They offered words of encouragement, brought her snacks during late-night practice, and occasionally asked about her progress. They didn't always understand the technical details, but they felt the passion she carried. Their support, though quiet, was a steady anchor in her journey. When the day of the talent show arrived, she was a bundle of nerves. Backstage, she could hear the laughter and chatter of other students, the applause for performers who had gone before her, and the faint strumming of guitars and tapping of drums. She felt small among so many talented individuals. For a moment, doubt crept in, whispering that she wasn't ready, that she might falter. But she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and thought about the hours of practice, the dedication, and the love she had for music. That thought steadied her. She walked onto the stage and felt the bright lights warm her face. The audience looked at her, and for a moment, she froze. But then her fingers found the keys, and she began to play. The first notes were soft, careful, and deliberate. Gradually, as she lost herself in the music, her confidence grew. She experimented with dynamics, added small flourishes, and let her emotions flow through every note. The melody was more complex than her previous performance, yet it felt natural, as if it had been waiting inside her to be released. The audience reacted in a way that both surprised and encouraged her. Some faces lit up with curiosity, others nodded along with the rhythm, and a few people leaned forward, captivated by the music. She could feel the energy of the room, feeding back into her performance. Every mistake she had feared was drowned out by the sincerity and passion of her playing. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. Backstage, she felt an overwhelming mix of relief and joy. Her friends and family rushed to her, hugging her and praising her performance. She felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond any award or recognition. She had faced her fears, pushed through challenges, and come out stronger on the other side. Music had been her constant companion, her teacher, and her friend, guiding her through moments of doubt and moments of triumph. This performance, though not perfect, was a turning point. She realized that challenges were not obstacles but opportunities to grow. Every difficult piece she practiced, every late night she spent at the keyboard, every doubt she overcame had prepared her for this moment. She began to dream bigger, imagining herself playing in larger venues, learning new styles, and sharing her music with more people. But even as she looked forward, she knew that the journey was just as important as the destination. The love for music, the persistence through struggle, and the courage to share her heart through melody were lessons she would carry forever. After the show, she spent the evening replaying the performance in her mind, thinking about what worked and what could be improved. She made notes in her journal, sketched out ideas for new compositions, and planned her next steps. She understood that growth was continuous, that mastery didn't come from a single performance but from ongoing effort and exploration. And she felt ready to face new challenges, ready to learn, and ready to let her music continue to evolve in ways she had never imagined. The spark that had ignited in her during her first simple tune now burned brighter than ever, fueled by the trials she had faced and the victories she had earned. After her performance at the school talent show, something shifted inside her. The applause and praise had given her confidence, but it was more than that. She began to feel that music was not just something she enjoyed. It was something she could grow into, something she could explore deeply and share with the world. She wanted to challenge herself in ways she had never done before, to take her music to new heights. The first step was learning to play more complex pieces, but that meant pushing herself past comfort zones she had clung to for so long. She spent hours at her keyboard, experimenting with chords, rhythms, and melodies she had only seen in sheet music or heard in recordings. At first, it felt awkward. Her fingers refused to cooperate, her timing was off, and the music didn't sound the way she imagined. She became frustrated, sometimes sitting back with her hands on her lap, staring at the keys, feeling defeated. But she reminded herself that every great musician had faced these same struggles. Progress wasn't instant, and every small mistake was part of the learning process. Slowly, she began to see improvement. Notes that once stumbled now flowed more naturally. Chords that felt impossible now made sense under her fingers. One day, she decided to try composing her own piece. She had ideas floating in her mind for weeks, fragments of melodies and rhythms she could hear when she closed her eyes. Putting them together was harder than she expected. She played a note, then another, searching for a pattern, a feeling that made the piece alive. Hours passed without a breakthrough, but she persisted. Finally, a simple progression clicked. The music began to take shape, and she felt a thrill that only creation could bring. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that mattered more than anything. Her friends noticed the change in her. She was more focused, more serious about her practice. Some admired her dedication, while others thought she was becoming too obsessed. Invitations to hang out were often declined, and some peers started teasing her about spending so much time with the keyboard. At first, their words stung, but she soon realized that their opinions didn't define her. Her music was for herself first, and for anyone else who wanted to listen second. That understanding freed her to take risks, to experiment, and to explore without fear of judgment. She also started watching videos of professional musicians, studying their technique, the way they moved their hands, how they expressed emotion through sound. She tried to mimic them at first, clumsily imitating rhythms and gestures. But soon, she began to understand that imitation was only the beginning. True skill came from combining what she learned from others with her own creativity. She experimented with blending styles, creating new sounds, and even adding small improvisations to familiar tunes. Each attempt brought new challenges but also new satisfaction. Her family continued to support her quietly. They noticed her long hours at the keyboard, the focus in her eyes, and the quiet determination that seemed to grow stronger each day. Sometimes they would listen while she played, not fully understanding the intricacies, but feeling the emotion and dedication behind each note. Their encouragement, though subtle, provided a steady reassurance that she wasn't alone on this path. She felt grateful for their presence, even if they weren't musicians themselves. One afternoon, a local music teacher visited her school, offering private lessons to students who showed promise. She hesitated to sign up at first, worried that formal lessons might make her music feel forced or less personal. But something inside her told her to try. She wanted guidance, someone to help her refine her technique and push her beyond what she could achieve on her own. Her parents encouraged her, seeing it as an opportunity to grow. She signed up and started attending weekly sessions, bringing new energy and curiosity to every lesson. The teacher was patient and kind, but also demanding. She was challenged to play pieces that seemed impossibly difficult, to focus on timing, expression, and precision. She struggled at first, making mistakes repeatedly, feeling frustrated when progress seemed slow. But her teacher reminded her that mistakes were part of the process, that the effort and persistence mattered more than perfection. Slowly, she began to feel herself improving, her fingers becoming more agile, her mind more attuned to the music. Meanwhile, she continued to practice her own compositions. Combining lessons from the teacher with her own creativity, she began to create pieces that were more complex and expressive. She experimented with different moods, from soft and gentle melodies to bold, powerful rhythms. Music became a way for her to process her feelings, to tell stories without words, to communicate emotions she couldn't always express otherwise. Each piece was a reflection of her journey, of the struggles she had faced, and the victories she had earned. She also began to play in front of small audiences outside of school. First, it was just family and close friends. Then, she was invited to perform at local gatherings, community events, and small competitions. Each time, she felt nervous, but also a sense of excitement. She noticed that her confidence was growing, that she could feel the music in her body, and that the audience responded to the emotion she put into every note. It was different from playing alone in her room. The connection with others added a new layer of meaning to her music. The turning point came during one particular community event. She had prepared a new piece, a combination of a melody she had learned and her own improvisations. As she began to play, she felt the music flowing through her naturally, each note connecting seamlessly to the next. The audience was silent at first, listening intently, and she could feel their curiosity. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her, letting the story she wanted to tell unfold through her fingers. For the first time, she realized that she wasn't just playing notes. She was communicating something deeper, something that touched people's hearts. By the time the last note faded, the audience erupted into applause. People were smiling, some even wiped away tears, and she felt a rush of pride and joy unlike anything she had experienced before. She had taken a risk, played a piece that was complex and personal, and it had resonated with others. In that moment, she understood that music was not just about skill or technique. It was about expression, connection, and courage. The doubts that had haunted her for months seemed to melt away, replaced by a new confidence and determination. After the performance, people came up to her, praising her skill and asking her questions about her process. She answered humbly, sharing how she had practiced, experimented, and pushed herself beyond comfort zones. She realized that her journey was inspiring to others, not because she was perfect, but because she had persevered, faced challenges, and grown through effort and dedication. That realization filled her with purpose. She wanted to continue sharing her music, helping others see that progress was possible, and that every struggle could lead to growth. In the weeks that followed, she continued to refine her skills, experiment with new compositions, and perform whenever she could. Each experience built on the last, gradually shaping her into a more confident and capable musician. She knew there was still much to learn, that mastery was a journey rather than a destination. But she also knew that she had crossed a significant threshold. She had taken her music from simple practice to something meaningful, something that could touch the hearts of others. And with that realization, she felt ready for whatever came next, ready to continue her journey, and ready to let her music grow into something extraordinary. The day of the big performance arrived, and she could feel the weight of anticipation in every step she took. The venue was larger than anything she had played in before. Rows of chairs stretched farther than she could see, and the stage lights were brighter than she had imagined. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the piano, her heart beating faster with each step. She could hear the murmurs of the audience settling in, the soft shuffle of feet, and the distant hum of conversation. Every muscle in her body felt tense, but underneath it all, there was a quiet excitement, a knowledge that she was ready. She had prepared for this moment for months. Every note had been practiced, every phrase thought through, every chord polished. Yet, standing there, she realized that no amount of preparation could erase the nerves completely. That was part of the experience, part of what made the performance real. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of all the nights she had spent practicing alone, the countless mistakes she had corrected, the hours she had poured into her music. That thought steadied her, giving her courage. As she sat at the piano, she felt a strange mix of vulnerability and power. The first few notes were soft and tentative, but as she continued, the music began to flow more naturally. Her fingers moved with precision and emotion, telling a story without words. The melody rose and fell, sometimes gentle, sometimes intense, drawing the audience in with every note. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her, feeling it vibrate through her body and into the room. The audience responded in ways she hadn't anticipated. There were gasps at unexpected notes, smiles at tender melodies, and some people even leaned forward, captivated by the depth of expression in her playing. She realized that the connection was mutual. The more she gave to the music, the more the audience responded. Her nerves melted into exhilaration, and she felt herself becoming one with the instrument, the melody, and the space around her. Each chord was deliberate, each pause meaningful, each flourish an extension of her heart. Midway through her performance, she took a risk. She improvised a few measures, weaving in a melody that had been forming in her mind for weeks. It was bold and uncertain, but it felt right. As she played, she could sense the audience leaning in, listening intently, hanging on every note. The energy in the room shifted. It was no longer just a recital. It was a shared experience. She felt a thrill, a kind of electric connection that made every ounce of practice worthwhile. The music became alive, moving through her and into the listeners in a way she had only dreamed of before. She noticed subtle reactions around the room. A teacher in the front row smiled and nodded, eyes wide with surprise and pride. A small child clutched the hand of a parent, listening with rapt attention. Other performers who had gone before her whispered to each other, impressed by the depth and skill she displayed. Each response reinforced her confidence, not in a boastful way, but in a way that confirmed her belief in the power of music to communicate emotions that words could not. She had planned every detail, yet allowed herself to be carried by the moment. When the piece reached its crescendo, she felt an overwhelming sense of release. Her heart soared with the music, and the room seemed to vibrate with the emotion she poured into every note. She realized that the hours of practice, the struggles with difficult passages, the quiet evenings alone, all of it had led to this exact moment. The music was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone in the room, resonating with their experiences, their feelings, their imaginations. As she brought the final notes to a close, she held the last key down a little longer than necessary, letting it linger in the air. There was a heartbeat of silence, a moment where the audience simply absorbed what they had heard. Then, the room erupted into applause. Hands clapped, feet stamped, and voices cheered. She opened her eyes, and for a second, it felt unreal. People were standing, clapping, some even whistling, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. Tears threatened, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of having shared something so personal and seeing it appreciated. Backstage, she was met with hugs, congratulations, and tears of pride from those who had known her journey from the beginning. Her parents embraced her tightly, their quiet support over the years now overflowing with visible emotion. Friends and fellow students expressed amazement at how far she had come, and even some who had doubted her were speechless, stunned by the depth and skill she had displayed. She realized that this performance was a culmination of everything she had worked for, a validation of her dedication, perseverance, and love for music. Afterward, she spent hours replaying the experience in her mind. She thought about the risks she had taken, the improvisations, the quiet moments when she let the music carry her. She understood that her performance was not just about technical skill. It was about expression, connection, and courage. She had learned that music was a living thing, something that could touch hearts, evoke emotions, and bring people together in a shared moment. That realization filled her with both pride and humility. In the following days, the impact of her performance continued. Teachers and students talked about it in the hallways, and some even asked for advice on how to improve their own playing. She found herself answering questions, sharing tips, and encouraging others to practice with the same dedication she had. She felt a responsibility, but also a joy, in helping others see that hard work and passion could produce something beautiful. Her journey was becoming a source of inspiration, not because she was perfect, but because she had faced challenges, persisted, and allowed her talent to shine. The performance also sparked new ideas and ambitions. She began to think about future pieces she could compose, new techniques she wanted to master, and other audiences she wanted to reach. The experience had opened her eyes to the possibilities of her own potential. She realized that every performance, every practice session, and every small victory was a step on a much larger journey. The music she played was evolving, just as she was, and she felt a deep sense of excitement about what lay ahead. That night, when the applause had faded and the lights were dimmed, she sat alone at her keyboard. She replayed the piece quietly, savoring each note, each phrase. There was a peaceful satisfaction in the silence, a recognition that she had given everything she had to the moment and that it had been received with openness and appreciation. She thought about the long nights of practice, the moments of doubt, the encouragement from friends and family, and the journey that had led her to this point. And she knew that this was only the beginning. From that day forward, her approach to music deepened. Every practice session became more intentional, every composition more expressive, every performance more connected. She realized that the awe she had inspired in others was not about showing off skill, but about conveying something true, something heartfelt. The audience had felt her journey, her emotions, and her dedication, and that connection was far more rewarding than any award or recognition could be. The experience taught her that music was a bridge between people, a language that could speak to anyone, regardless of age, background, or experience. It reinforced her belief in persistence, in the importance of facing challenges, and in the power of dedication and passion. Each performance became an opportunity to grow, to explore, and to share a part of herself with the world. And as she looked ahead, she felt ready for whatever came next, confident in her ability to continue creating, learning, and inspiring through the music she loved. After the unforgettable performance, life seemed different for her. People recognized her talent, not just for playing music, but for the emotion and depth she brought to every note. Teachers, friends, and even strangers who had heard about her performance began to show interest in her journey. Invitations to perform at community events, school functions, and local gatherings started coming in. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Each opportunity was a chance to share her music, but also a reminder that expectations had grown. The simple joy of playing that had carried her through lonely evenings now had a spotlight shining on it, and she was determined to honor it. She continued to practice daily, as she always had, but now with a broader vision. She wanted to expand her skills, explore different styles, and learn to express more complex emotions through her music. She studied recordings of professional musicians, attended workshops, and even started experimenting with composing longer pieces. Each new challenge tested her patience and skill, but she embraced it. She remembered the long hours of practice, the mistakes she had made, and the slow but steady progress that had brought her to this point. Every success and failure was a step toward mastery, and she valued each one. Her family remained a quiet but steady source of support. They didn't always understand the intricacies of her music, but they understood her passion. They celebrated her small victories, encouraged her through setbacks, and listened when she needed to share her excitement or frustration. Their presence reminded her that her journey was not solitary, that love and support could make even the most challenging path more manageable. She often thought back to the nights she had practiced alone, comparing them to the warmth of having her family nearby. Both experiences had shaped her, teaching her resilience, patience, and the joy of sharing. As she performed more often, she began to notice the subtle ways her music affected people. Some were moved to tears, others smiled and nodded along, and some came up to her afterward to share how a particular piece had touched them. These interactions were humbling and inspiring. She realized that music was more than notes and rhythm. It was a language that could connect people, convey feelings that words could not, and create shared moments of understanding and emotion. Each performance was an opportunity to touch lives, and she approached it with gratitude and mindfulness. Alongside performances, she focused on refining her technique. She worked on precision, timing, and dynamics, while also nurturing creativity and expression. She experimented with improvisation, blending different styles, and incorporating her own voice into traditional pieces. She learned that technical skill alone was not enough. it had to be paired with heart and authenticity. Every piece she played was a reflection of her journey, her emotions, and her growth as a musician. The process of creation became as important as the performance itself, a continuous dialogue between her, the instrument, and the audience. She also began mentoring younger students who showed an interest in music. Teaching brought a new dimension to her understanding. She found joy in helping others discover their own voice, encouraging them to practice, experiment, and express themselves. She shared the lessons she had learned, the importance of patience, persistence, and passion. Watching others grow and find confidence in their abilities was rewarding in a way that mirrored her own journey. It reinforced the idea that music was a living, shared experience, something that could inspire and connect across generations. Despite growing recognition, she remained grounded. She knew that success was fleeting if it was measured only by applause or accolades. What mattered most was the ongoing journey, the daily commitment to improvement, and the joy of creating something meaningful. She approached each new opportunity with humility, focusing on the music rather than the audience, and on the expression rather than the performance. This mindset allowed her to maintain authenticity, even as her reputation grew. Over time, she began to see patterns in her growth. She noticed how small improvements accumulated into larger ones, how moments of frustration often preceded breakthroughs, and how persistence was the key to overcoming challenges. She reflected on her early days, the times she had felt alone with her music, unsure of her abilities. Looking back, she could see how those quiet moments had built resilience, discipline, and a deep love for the art. Each struggle had shaped her into the musician she had become, and each success, no matter how small, had fueled her determination to continue. Her story began to inspire others. Students who had been hesitant to practice were encouraged by her dedication. Friends who had doubted their own talents found motivation in her persistence. Teachers and parents admired her commitment, recognizing that true skill required patience, practice, and passion. She understood that influence was not about fame, but about showing what could be achieved through dedication and love for one's craft. This awareness gave her a sense of responsibility, but also a profound sense of fulfillment. In quiet moments, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the first simple tune she had played, the small victories, the challenges she had faced, and the turning points that had led her to this stage. She realized that every note she had played carried a story, every practice session had built resilience, and every performance had deepened her connection with music and people. She felt gratitude for the journey itself, for the lessons learned, and for the ability to continue growing and expressing herself through music. Looking ahead, she dreamed of new possibilities. She envisioned larger stages, new audiences, and more ambitious compositions. She imagined collaborating with other musicians, exploring different instruments, and experimenting with genres she had never tried. She understood that mastery was a lifelong journey, not a destination, and she embraced it with curiosity and determination. Each day presented an opportunity to learn, create, and share, and she welcomed it wholeheartedly. Her recognition did not change her core approach. She remained dedicated, humble, and focused on the music itself. She celebrated progress rather than perfection, expression rather than technicality, and connection rather than applause. This perspective allowed her to maintain joy and authenticity, even as her opportunities expanded. She knew that music was a gift, a tool for expression and connection, and that sharing it sincerely was the most meaningful achievement. In the end, she understood that her journey was about more than skill. It was about persistence, courage, and the willingness to share one's heart with others. It was about finding joy in practice, growth in challenges, and fulfillment in connection. Her music had started with a basic tune, a simple expression of curiosity and passion. But through dedication, exploration, and openness to learning, it had grown into something powerful and inspiring. She had touched lives, found her own voice, and discovered the endless possibilities that awaited her. And with that knowledge, she continued forward, ready to play, create, and inspire, one note at a time.